What is going on, everybody? The original Mako back, and we have our first character guide today for Gunfire Reborn's new DLC characters. But before we get into it, be sure you check the links down below. As always, if you want to see me play this character live and use some of these strats, then check out the Twitch link down below. And if you want to help support the channel a little bit extra, you can check out the member link down below as well. As you can see on screen, we have the members that are part of the channel right now. And I really appreciate the extra support. It means a ton, helps out a lot. And there are 4 different tiers that come with some fun perks and benefits. So check out that member link down below. I would really appreciate it. It helps the channel out immensely. So check that out. It would mean a lot. But that being said, let's go ahead and get into it and talk about our favorite fox, the Fire Fox, Lee. So, quick overview of the character here. We've got 75 health and 95 shield. This is assuming you have all of these unlocked, okay? But 75 health and 95 shield with a 5.2 speed, which is faster than our other elemental friend, the cat, but not very fast. So if we scroll through the characters, we've got 5.2, 5.2, 5, 5.5, 6, 5.2, 5.2, 5.5. So not necessarily just average, I would say. This is like the average speed for the characters. So not the slowest, not the fastest, just very average with speed. The E ability, your quote-unquote ultimate. You cast a shockwave, which deals 525 fire damage to enemies along the way. Every 1 energy consumed, up to 60, during the charge will boost the damage by 2%. So the more energy you have, the more damage you do. This ability will also evolve when it consumes 30 energy, increasing the damage and AoE range by 100%. Initial maximum energy is 60, and you restore 2% energy per second automatically, or 2 energy when killing enemies with fire damage. So there's a lot going on there, I know. Essentially, you have energy that regenerates over time, or if you kill an enemy with fire damage, the more energy you have, the more damage you do, and assuming you have at least 30 energy, and you use it all when you're charging your E, your ability evolves, and it'll deal more damage and in a bigger area. So it's a lot going on there, but it's not too hard once you use it and kind of wrap your head around it. Also, the Q is the Blazing Meteor. It starts with a capacity of 8, and you summon a Blazing Meteor that deals 900 fire damage, and you recover 2 energy for every enemy hit by your Blazing Meteor. So another way to deal fire damage and another way to help restore some energy. So now that we have this quick overview of our character here, we're going to be talking about 4 separate categories. These categories are going to be Ascensions, weapons, scrolls, and spiritual remnants or blessings that you can get from Mr. Mushroom Man. I'm going to be going through the top 3 things in each category and explaining why I think they're really good on this character. And we're just going to be, most categories will also have an honorable mention or 2. It's hard to narrow it down to just 3, but we're going to be talking about all of it. And once again, I want to make something very clear before we get fully into it here. This is based on my experience playing this character. I've played this character a lot. I feel like I have good opinions about her. But some of you will like to play this character a different way. Some of you will like other things. And those things are perfectly fine and I'm sure very, very viable. But this is just based on what I think. So if you play this character a different way, please tell me down below. Tell me some of the weapons, ascension, scrolls, and blessings that you enjoy on this character, and I'd love to hear about it. But this is just based on my thoughts, my opinions, and maybe for somebody who doesn't really know where to start with this character, this can kind of help them out a little bit. Or if you want to, I really feel like this is a good way to help maximize the potential. But anyways, let's go ahead and get into our first category, which is talking about Ascensions. So first one is an honorable mention that we have, because like I said, it's hard to narrow it down to 3, but our first honorable mention goes to Flame Resonance in the Ashes category. And as you can see on screen, enemies hit by Blazing Meteor or Spiritual Flame take more fire damage and deal less damage, up to 3 stacks. So, damage reduction, I've said this in a lot of my other guide videos before, but as you get to harder and harder levels, damage reduction becomes more and more important. The more ways you have to make enemies do less damage is huge. Flame Resonance is a way to do that. Both of your abilities will add stacks, and it is up to 3 stacks. So at tier 3, enemies could be doing 60% less damage, and it lasts for 16 seconds, which is a very long time. Not to mention, on top of the damage reduction, you're getting a buff of up to potentially 90% damage at tier 3. So This is a super, super useful tool for helping on higher difficulties, essentially. I would say this is more of a survivability Ascension. Even though you have the damage buff, I would say use it more for your survivability, but regardless, a really good overall Ascension. Now, let's get into the top 3. These are in no particular order, okay? I'm just going to go through what I think are the 3 best. Same for all the other categories. I think these 3 are the 3 best. So, first, we have Firefox Blessing, which is after Spiritual Flame evolves, it deals additional fire damage to hit enemies. At level 1, you can see it's a pretty basic 50% fire damage increase buff. But once we get to tier 2, it says when 60 energy is consumed, it can evolve a second time. Remember, when we just read the overview, consuming or evolving it adds an additional 100% damage and AoE. So we evolve it twice, and all of a sudden we have another 100% AoE and damage, which is insane, plus the additional 75% fire damage on top of it. This lets you clear rooms because the AoE is going to be huge, and you just do massive damage with 1E. You need to make sure you have enough energy to do it. So if you start with base 60 energy, the only way you can evolve it twice is if you use all of your energy and have full energy every single time. Now, there's obviously ways to have more maximum energy, and there's ways to help restore energy faster, but you want to make sure you have a lot of energy to be using this second evolution every single time. It's a fantastic Ascension, and once again, is a room clearer and run winner. Next up, to help with this one, is Energetic Spirit. Increases your max energy and energy recovery speed. So this isn't just good for your E ability, which I think is probably the best of the two, but even if you're doing a Q build, there are some other Ascensions that can actually buff weapons, buff skill damage, based on how much max energy you have. So having more max energy is great. It helps with the Firefox Blessing, but the recovery speed is just as important, because sometimes it can feel really slow recovering max energy. Maybe you're not getting lucky with your fire damage procs. Maybe, you just don't have any other buffs to your skill or to your recovery speed, and it can take a while to get back to your max energy. So the increased recovery speed will help do that a little bit. Super useful, super convenient in most builds you're trying to do on this character, and I think it's just a great Ascension to have. Last, but certainly not least, we have Furious Flame. Now this one, it doesn't matter what build you're doing. It does not matter at all. Like literally you could be doing a Q build, an E build, a weapon build. Regardless, you're probably going to want increased fire damage. You're probably going to get a buff from fire damage. So having Furious Flame, which increases fire damage, is fantastic. Not to mention the tier 3 is ridiculous. Fire damage is... Every single enemy has a red health bar. The problem with flame damage is sometimes enemies will have either a shield, which is blue, or armor, which is yellow, that you have to get through before you get to that health bar. And fire damage does less damage to shield and armor. But if you have increased damage to shield and armor, then you can cleave through those health bars faster and get to the red health bar, which is where fire damage really shines. Once again, every single enemy in the game has a red health bar, so you're going to be dealing increased damage to every single one of them. You just have to get through the shields and armor a little bit quicker. So this is one that I think is probably the most important, and maybe not the most important, but the most flexible for sure on this character. So those are the top 3 for Ascensions, with our honorable mention of Flame Resonance. Once again, there's a lot of really good options here, but I think those are my top 3, at least for me, that I've experienced so far. Next up, we're going to talk about weapons, which is the only one where I don't have an honorable mention, but we do have what I think are the top 3 here. And once again, in no particular order, we are going to go through them. First up, we have the Crimson Fire Scale. Flame weapons are going to shine on this character, and Crimson Fire Scale has one of the highest damage outputs of all fire weapons. The right-click ability is insane. Accuracy is definitely hit or miss, so you want to look for accuracy as one of your weapon affixes, but it deals insane damage, insane boss damage, insane clear potential. if you have some of the weapon damage buffs or fire damage buffs that you can get on this character, you're going to be dealing even more damage. It is absolutely ridiculous, absolutely insane, and is a top contender for a reason. Once again, the right-click ability on this character is ridiculous. The only downside I say for this character is sometimes you can get a little bit conflicted with trying to balance, like trying to spam your abilities and be using the Crimson Fire Scales right-click and making sure you're getting enough headshots to get right-clicks, all that stuff. There's a lot to balance and make sure you're using it all super effectively with this weapon, but regardless, you can't ignore this weapon on this character because taking a weapon that is already insane and adding increased damage to it is borderline criminal. So that's why Crimson Fire Scale's up here. Next up on our list, we have the Demon Lore. Once again, obvious reasons. This is the highest damage potential weapon in the game in terms of DPS, and having this just get buffed by extra fire damage means you can do some pretty insane things. Not to mention, obviously, the Demon Lore is most effective when you aren't reloading. So this is, I'm getting a little specific here, I know, but I have to mention this because of how good it is. I just talked about the Crimson Fire Scale's downside being you have to, potentially be spamming your right click, and then you don't have much time to use your Q or your E. You have less time from your abilities because you have to be using your weapon. Well, you don't have to, but you should be using your weapon ability as well. With the Demon Lore, if you get something like Against the Flow or pretty much just Against the Flow, it's not too hard to find, then you can shoot your Demon Lore, get some headshots, get some stacks, and while you're letting your ammo recuperate, you're spamming abilities. Shoot some more, spam abilities. Shoot some more, spam abilities. It's a really, really, really good, hit and miss there with like a dichotomy with these two weapons, or with this weapon, because you're allowing it to build up stacks. You never have to reload, and while it's regenerating its ammo, you can be spamming your abilities, which you want to be spamming your abilities for most of the time. So even without that, though, the Demon Lore is a fantastic fire weapon, insane damage, insane potential, and it just gets buffed with this character. Now, last, and definitely not least, probably my favorite weapon, and it's a new one. You know them, you love them, the Cloud Weaver. The Cloud Weavers are amazing. I love this weapon design. I've enjoyed it so much, just running through enemies with this weapon, and I can't wait to find more builds and potential that this weapon has. But one of the biggest synergies that I think is on this character, because this character is one that you want to spam abilities. You are ability heavy. You're going to get most of your damage from abilities most of the time, like 90% of the time, especially if you're being as effective as possible. This weapon allows you to just sit back and get free damage from your weapon while you're spamming abilities. You have to, every once in a while, press the left click to shoot them out, but then they are going to be aimed directly at your crosshair. You don't have to shoot them. You don't have to worry about, making sure you're on target, because you're going to be aiming your abilities, and the weapon just automatically moves to where your crosshair is. It's ridiculous. It's insane. The amount of potential's unreal. You can get all of the elemental ball synergies, which obviously works super well with the elemental builds that you can have on this character with the fire damage. It's immaculate. Definitely my favorite weapon on this character, and if you haven't tried it out, please try it out. They are insane and so much fun to use with a character that spams abilities. It's amazing. So there we go. That's what we have for weapons. Once again, they are super good, super convenient, and those are my top three. There are a lot of weapons that you can use without a doubt that are still really good, but those are the ones that I have found myself using the most or wanting to use the most on this character. Next up, we're going to go to Scrolls, and we do have an honorable mention here, and our honorable mention for this category goes to our good friend Spirit Feline, which is pretty much, assuming you're on higher difficulties, this is really good on any character, but I have to mention it for this character because she's a little squishy. She doesn't have as much shield and health as most of the other characters, so she can die much quicker. With Spirit Feline, however, she dies at the same speed as every other character who takes Spirit Feline because it's percent based, not total based. So Spirit Feline is phenomenal for survivability, and this character definitely does need a little bit of extra survivability. And this is one of the ways to help get it. But aside from our honorable mention, let's move on to our top 3. For this character, it's not super, I mean, you want to build skill damage. It's pretty obvious. So the first one we'll talk about is Spirit Bible, which is just a 120% skill damage buff. I feel like I don't need to say much more. The skill damage buff is ridiculous and is super useful for both of your skills, regardless of which ones you're building. So yeah, Spirit Bible's on here, but that's the only scroll that I want to base around skill damage. Any other skill damage scroll is fantastic and you want to take it, but I want to, get a little bit more creative with the top 3 scrolls. So next up on our list, besides Spirit Bible, is going to go to another relatively obvious one, but Flame Shard. Almost everything you do is based on fire damage, right? So having an additional 25% fire damage is pretty good. Not to mention being immune to burn is pretty good. It can work super well with something like Painkiller, which may or may not come up later in the video. But Flame Shard is super useful, and you're just going to get an absolute donkey load of use out of this scroll. So that's why I have it on the top 3 list. And then last but not least, another scroll that we have talked about today goes to our good friend Against the Flow. Recover 15% ammo to the mag every second for 4 seconds when dealing damage to an enemy. When the effect ends, instead, lose 1 random ammo type from reserves every second. So essentially what this is you shoot enemies, and assuming your magazine's not empty, then ammo will start to slowly recover to the magazine. Why is this so good? For the reason I just described for the Demon Lore, it can translate to every weapon, where you shoot the enemy a little bit, make sure you don't use all your ammo, and then while your ammo is regenerating, you spam your abilities, and then you do that over and over and over and over again forever. There are a lot more weapons or affixes that benefit from you not reloading. So Against the Flow, allowing you to not reload, keep your ammo in the mag, and allow you to spam abilities is ridiculous and super fun on this character. And I highly recommend looking for this every single time you're playing on the Fox. So those are our scrolls for the top 3, and our honorable mention, obviously. Once again, I mean, I can't really state this enough. You just want to build skill damage. So any of the other skill damage scrolls are going to be fantastic and super useful for you. But those other ones that I listed are also really, really useful and are going to be super good for your builds. And there's no other way around it, really. So next up, we have our last and not least category. I've said last but not least like 800 times today, but that's fine. Spiritual remnants or blessings that you get from Mushroom Man. And this one actually has 2 honorable mentions. The first one that I'm going to talk about here is Cataclysm, which is plus 1% damage of Blazing Meteor for every 1 energy stored. When you cast it, you also cast it on all enemies within 8 meters. You can do that only every 4 seconds, and every remaining Blazing Meteor use will reduce the cooldown by 0.1 second up to 3 seconds. So basically, the more Blazing Meteors you have, the better. The more energy you have, the better. And it does AoE damage every 4 seconds. So there are some things, if you want to do a Q build, this is what you want to go with. The Q build is absolutely viable and really, really good, high damage. I don't think it's as good as the E, but the Q is phenomenal. And if you want to go with that build, that's why this is on here. Once again, Spiritual Remnants are so build dependent that it's hard to pick like a top 3. But I felt like I needed to talk about this as an honorable mention because it's really good. If you're doing a Q build, it's like necessary. So that's why that is here, and that is our first honorable mention. But we do have one more honorable mention for this category, and that has to go to our friend Painkiller. All right, so you obtain a random elemental effect when you deal damage, and you convert all of your negative elemental effects applied to the hero to the bonus with opposite effects. So every time you deal damage, you obtain a random elemental effect, which can proc Flame Shard, or if you don't have Flame Shard, then you get regen per second, health regen per second, which is super useful. You want to be, once again, flame damage is really, really good. But not only that, anytime you take corrosive damage or lightning damage, you also get positive effects from it. And at higher levels, you're going to be taking elemental damage a good chunk. So Painkiller can be super useful. And as a second or third Ascension, if you have Flame Shard, then it's really, really great to have. So just another honorable mention I wanted to add in there for you guys in case you want to take this and use it as a build. Next up, we have our actual top 3, which is going to come in the form of 2 being exclusive ones to the Fox, which makes sense, and then one of them just being a remnant that I think is just it's just so good that you want to be using it a lot. But anyway, let's talk about the top 3. First here we have Flame Dance, plus 30% weapon damage and plus 5% enemy damage taken when you inflict burn on an enemy. This goes up to 10 stacks, which means up to 300% weapon damage and up to 50% increased enemy damage taken when you inflict burn onto enemies. Once again, this just ups your DPS on your skills, on your weapons. Everything gets an increase of DPS from this. I don't think I need to explain too much more why Flame Dance is so good, but it is really, really useful and something that you're going to want to have in most of your runs. Next up, we have Raging Inferno, another exclusive, which is plus 15% base damage of Spiritual Flame for every enemy hit by it. You do lose 10 stacks of this when you miss, but it also goes up to 30 stacks, and you recover 1 energy for every 2 meters moved. So we'll start with the easy part of this. Additional energy recover. When you're moving, you just recover increased energy, which, as we talked about, recovering energy faster is super useful. But the damage aspect here is 15% base damage of your Spiritual Flame for every enemy hit by it. So if you hit 30 enemies in a row, you get up to 30 stacks. That means you are now doing 450% increased base damage with your Spiritual Flame. Now, obviously, if you miss, you lose 10 stacks. But most of the time, you're not going to be missing. It has wide AoE. If you're using that evolution synergy, it has even wider AoE. And this is just a huge damage increase and is going to help you cleave through rooms and enemies, and it's phenomenal and super fun to see in action. And last but not least, we have Ultimate Gambler. Once again, we talked about how good some of these Ascensions are and how useful they are. Well, the best way to make sure you get those Ascensions is by being able to re-roll your Ascension choices once per chest. If you get this early, you're almost guaranteed to get all of the Ascensions you want. It is just a super good way to help fix your build, and there's a lot of good options. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't even... Okay, sorry. I do have one more to talk about after this, but there's a lot of good options, and being able to just make sure you can pick from them and get the exact one you need for the exact moment, or just be able to make sure you get all the ones you need for a good run is so, so useful on every character, and I think it's hard not to take it, especially early. But if you want to just... instead of Ultimate Gambler, if you want to just risk it and say, I'm just going to go balls to the wall and go all in on damage and just try to see how much DPS we can do, and I just hope I get lucky with the Ascensions, then you want to replace Ultimate Gambler with Skill Freak, which is the plus there's a 75% chance for a secondary skill to deal 200% damage and a 25% chance for the secondary skill to deal 300% damage. You're going to be using your Q a lot, even if you're doing an E build. So having this means that your secondary skill is going to be popping off even more. And just adds to the DPS numbers, adds to the total damage numbers. And especially if you're doing a Q build, you want Skill Freak as well. But like I said, spiritual remnants and blessings are so dependent on the build that you want to do that it's really hard to pick a bad one, and it's really hard to find a top 3 because it's the top 3 switched based on what you want to do. So anyways, that's it for our guide today. This is, I think there's a lot of good stuff here. Once again, I know a lot of you play this differently, so once again, leave your comments down below on some of the things that you use that maybe I didn't even think about, maybe I just haven't tried yet, and I can probably try them and see if I really like that build. So leave those thoughts down below, but regardless, that is our ultimate guide for the Fox. Thank you guys so much for all the support. As always, we will have the ultimate guide for the Monkey coming out relatively soon. But thanks again. Hopefully you all have a wonderful rest of your day. I love each and every one of your faces, and I will catch you all in the next video.